Welcome back to another episode of the Make It Your Business podcast. I'm Duncan Casey. This is James Murray. I didn't actually say the name of my company last time. I don't think so. I'm Duncan Casey of Copper Sprocket. We are a video content marketing company, and James Murray is, of course, James Murray Finance, your go-to finance specialist.
We'll work on that.
We'll work on that. Sorry. Yes, unpolished is the kindest way I can put this. Today we're going to talk about social media and using social media as business owners, and understanding the different platforms, understanding your client avatar, your ideal client, where best to market to them using social media. So we're going to cover that off today from the perspective of micro business or startup owners, and give our take. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on podcast platforms or YouTube. We put these out as regularly as we can, usually once every 2 weeks. So please look forward to that. We also put out shorts and stuff in between, little bits of information. So please look out for those, and leave us a review if you would be so kind. A good review would be nice. Ideally, because it all helps. So thank you so much. But before we get into that, we're going to discuss a little roundup from what's been going on for us in the last week. So James, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons for the topic is I got an inquiry, a proper inquiry from TikTok. So that's exciting. I didn't really anticipate when I started out using TikTok. I wasn't a user of TikTok originally, so I sort of had disregarded it. And a guy called Dan Russell, who's actually somebody quite interesting, we'll probably get him on the pod at some point. He recommended that I use some of the content marketing that I've been using anyway and repurposed it on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought, well, okay, why not? I might as well just put it on there anyway. I'm sort of posting these things on other platforms like YouTube, Instagram, because I thought that's really where my audience is. And it's quite nice to know that there's actually other platforms out there that you can have access to an audience. Just because you don't use that platform, actually there are still people using them that could be your potential clients. So yeah, I had a proper inquiry off that. Somebody looking for some funding. And had a phone call with them later that day last week, and it was just really good to get that feedback and know that there's inquiries outside of the usual sort of standard methods.
Very good. Well, I have a question around that I think is going to kick us off into what we're going to talk about today. Before we get to that, just of my week, what has been going on? I've been doing. What have I been doing? I've been doing it's been a week of looking kind of outside the box thinking. So I've been doing a lot more trying to contact people who are looking for production producers, really. And it's funny because my business is kind of like it's educating people on what we can as outsource providers or contractors bring to the table that you maybe don't have to hire in-house for, and the value we create around that's all still within your budget, and obviously we could leading on from what we talked about last on the previous episode about spring statement and employers' national insurance going up and everything like that. Obviously we can help mitigate that by delivering those services without the need to pay for an employee, and not having to pay for a team, not having to train people, not having to buy equipment, all that good stuff. Or the subscriptions that come with having to run it, like, Adobe, we use Adobe, but there's loads of others. Even if you're going to use AI, you've still got to pay for the subscription, and you've got to have someone who knows what they're doing anyway, because they've got to hold its hand. So, I've been doing a lot more outreach through kind of job classified, that kind of thing, trying to speak to people who are maybe looking for, think that, they need to hire in-house, and maybe trying to sort of sway them and, it's still within budget, but like, would you come and look at us and contracting us instead because we can deliver?
What sort of platform is that you've been?
Various. So I recently, Juno, which is a weird name, but it's a bit more kind of specialist in terms of, I think, you have to be approved to get on it. It's not like a Glassdoor or some of the others, I think, where you can say anyone can just put anything on there.
Yeah.
And so far it's been interesting. I don't know, we'll see where we get to with it. It's hard to know because much like most of these things, you put things out in the ether and you kind of just wait. But I think if someone married one of those types of platforms with a social media type element, so you could post on there to a network, I think that might help as well, because you could be putting out content but then I suppose now becomes a bit of a free-for-all.
I suppose some of the regularly used ones that a lot of people use is it Bark and Fiverr?
Yeah, Fiverr's a bit more, if you have one task that needs doing, and let's be honest, you're going to outsource it to India. That's a portal to that. I mean, don't get me wrong, not always, but most of the time. The problem with those kind of platforms is they are very, what's the word? They compete mostly on budget. So, and therefore, I think the knowledge of people who go on there, they're already going on there with the intent of, I've got to get this as cheap as possible. And I don't care about the quality so much. And I think which is fine. I mean, it's the kind of thing where actually it's good. It's a global market. It's useful for that. But I think when it comes down to the likes of me and what we do at Copper Sprocket, it's like we want to deliver more kind of proper filmmaking into people's content. And
yeah, you're not going to get the client on Fiverr for that. No. It's definitely good for some projects that you might want completing, but not for that type of refined thing.
Anyway, let's get into today's topic, which is talking about social media and talking about marketing on there. You said you had an inquiry from TikTok, and I was going to ask you what, if you're able to say, and I don't know, but what sort of inquiry it was, because I would imagine the kind of inquiries you're going to get through TikTok are going to be more like someone looking to buy a private individual looking to buy a car or something like that.
It wasn't actually. No, it was business finance. So,
amazing, even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, somebody looking to buy a piece of equipment for their business. They've been trading a good amount of time, solid reputation. A very good quality, high quality lead. So, and by lead, I don't mean somebody that's just filled out an inquiry form. A proper business that's engaged and I've been able to have a serious conversation with them. But I mean, I go back to Dan Russell, the chap who recommended TikTok, and the reason he sort of knew of it was he started a sweet shop business with his daughter, who was in school at the time. It's a lovely project.
He's become a bit of an urban legend, I think, around our way.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic because he's been able to create a micro business, teach his daughter how to start up, go through the process of marketing. They were selling sweets, which I think worked really well with the TikTok audience. They'd do those TikTok lives where they filled the sweet bags up and they'd have an online shop. And then they've gone all the way through. I think she's gone to university or she's leaving school now, and they've actually sold the business. Amazing. So they've got this lovely start to finish example that she can now take with her for the rest of her life, and I'm sure she'll go on to do some amazing things. And he's been able to share that experience with his daughter, so it's a really good feel good story. And as I say, we'll definitely have to get him on at some point and hear about his journey. But obviously when he told me about advertising on TikTok, well, not advertising, but I guess just putting my awareness of my business and sharing my brand and everything else, I guess I was a bit skeptical, but I thought there's no real cost. I've already producing the content anyway, why not put it out on there? And for those that don't know, I do some informative videos and just share my knowledge as a finance broker for mainly for businesses, but also to help sort of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, people within businesses that maybe want to work their way up through businesses, and just generally give some sort of guidance in that sort of fashion. And it's gradually grown, but I've not had a huge amount of inquiries. A bit like any of these sort of platforms, you don't at the start, and you don't really know who's watching your stuff. So I'm a big advocate of knowing who your audience is and trying to target them, but sometimes it's really difficult in this example to know who's watching what.
Well, so you made an interesting point there that I'd like to touch on, and then we need to talk about, I think, the different platforms, client avatars, and where you put what, because I think that does play a role I I often come up against this with when I talk to clients and prospective clients, the conflation of sales and marketing. Now, that is usually a term that's probably quite old school now, but within companies, people would always talk about sales and marketing. Sales and marketing, the conflation of sales with marketing, or advertising and marketing. And I try my best to decouple those things, because I find as soon as you tack sales on, the expectation is there's an ROI, a direct ROI from what you're doing. What I spend on marketing, I can expect X return on investment. Wrong.
Well, people want to, management, owners of companies want to measure their return on investment for that asset, for that piece of marketing material. And that isn't always possible, especially in a service-led business.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting, so there are KPIs you should absolutely look for, and we can touch on some of those maybe on a future episode, because I can take you through the kind of KPIs you should be looking for. And I think as business owners, like for us as an outsourced marketing company, I'm always keen to try and educate business owners. It doesn't always work, but on what the key metrics are, where the needle should move, and what signs to look out for that what we're doing is having an effect. But Rory Sutherland, to put it this way, and I do often quote him when it comes down to what marketing is and isn't, right? Which is, it's the context. He says okay a lot. Which is like, okay, you're right, smart. Okay. Okay. But that marketing is the context for your good or service, right? It is the way of enabling the world or prospective clients to contextualize what your good or service is. Now, that can be a literal video of someone using your product so that they can see the application of it, or it could be a suggestion. Perfume ads are the perfect example of this, where it's kind of like, well, how do you visually contextualize a smell? You have to put in it. It always has to be sort of artsy-fartsy kind of, like idea of what you are, who you are with. But ultimately, it's saying, who are you with this product or service? That is distinct from advertising, because advertising is putting something in front of someone and saying, buy it, and here's how much it costs. It's more of a direct, this is the thing, this is either how much it costs or what it achieves, that kind of thing.
Ronsil, it does what it says on the tin.
One of the best marketing slogans around, but I would say that's marketing rather than advertising. In the sense of what you are doing is you're saying what the product is and what it does. And it's a very, very, very good context for what it is, right? And there are a few examples, not to go off too much on this, but there are a few examples of where that gets so into the zeitgeist that it becomes parlance. In other words, people say it does what it says on the tip, it's the Ronsil of X.
That's the dream.
Yeah. So, but again, it's not something you necessarily engineer. I think it's, again, that's Rory Sutherland says this about marketing as well. It's an element of marketing has to be wasteful. By necessity, there needs to be a degree of wastefulness to marketing, because in order to appear like like something like that probably cost £1 billion for, a bunch of focus groups and a bunch of PR people, and, sat down and came up with that. Then the advert had to be made, and this is back in the time when, it would have cost a lot to make. Anyway, I don't want to go off into the weeds too much on that, but the point is, it's like that you need to appear like, whether it's time or budget, you need to appear like you have the space to do the marketing, and the marketing is part of your business, and it is about contextualizing. Now, because we have social media now and all that stuff, we have access to the market a lot more. We can all be doing it. We're doing it now, and it's democratized it to such a point that we can start a podcast, we can do video content, we can do very high end video content.
But that's devalued it as well.
I wouldn't say it's deep. It's become, because I do think about this a lot. I do think I don't think it's devalued it. It's made it more imperative, and it has made it harder to therefore stand out in a sense. But it's also meant, you can be directly in front of the people you want to talk about, and there's so much more value now. And we see it. It's a wild west, but in online advertising, and especially through social media, and that's how Facebook became a $1 billion company without actually having $1 billion. Right? It's the valuation of it was so great because they realized they had all these people with all their demographics, and not just that, but they could figure out what they liked, what they didn't like. even down to like analyzing pictures. I mean, that's the thing that's come out recently, isn't it? That like they would target weight loss pills at females who deleted selfies within the last 12 hours. It's gross. But the point was, if they'd done that, if they deleted a selfie, and they probably meant because they weren't happy with how they looked, which then that could be down to weight. So here's some weight loss, but and that's not pleasant. And that's going into the reads a bit. But it's the value is immense, but it's also a bit unwieldy. And I think as business owners, it's about assessing. I have this conversation again with clients or new clients all the time about keyword strategy, having a strategy to their content. Now, most of them don't want to pay for it. So invariably you end up going, well, okay, best guess is this for the first tranche of content. From that, we will gather, say for over a quarter, we will then gather data, see what's working, and just try and double down and keep doubling down on what's working. Now it's a longer term approach.
You've got to see the value in that though, because I think you just said about people paying for it. I think that's probably because they don't see the value in it at the start. I think if you understand the power of it, then you might allocate more of a budget towards that. Or if you're maybe a larger company, or if you're venture capital backed, then you're more likely to invest in those resources. When you're maybe a smaller SME, that might take a backseat. So you might only invest in those things because you've got a bit of a surplus budget. And which at the moment, we're finding a lot of businesses, they don't have that surplus. So they are only prioritizing their budgets on the thing they can see a direct return on investment.
And again, that's the problem you see. And this is what I try to communicate to people, is that you are taking a more of a scattergun approach, and you therefore cannot be guaranteed any kind of, it's much better if you've got a strategy guide and you've got something that everyone can be held to account over, and in those first 3 to 6 months, you can then say, well, that we predicted that this should go that way. There are, the reason why the big boys or girls get paid the big bucks is because they'll have access to things. Like one of my friends is a MD at a big PR firm, and they look at, I think it's white space. They'll talk about where they can predict where advertising spend is going to go in the next 12 months and where the gaps are that you could spend into, correlated with where the low competition is, and all that. So in other words, where your ad money is best put in the next 12 months. And those sort of algorithms and stuff cost a fortune, and therefore are part. But what it does is it enables you to not waste money as much, because you're going, okay, but I can target. I know exactly where to target. I know what I'm measuring, and I know over that 6 months what to look out for. Whereas the problem is, I have to say to people, right, well, you need to commit to 12 months at least of doing this, because bearing in mind all this stuff is seasonal. So podcasts, everything, like during the summer, your numbers will go down. Especially if you're on a professional platform like LinkedIn, you've got to expect a dip in numbers. You've got to expect a dip. But if you're not doing it regularly, you still have to keep it up, because even if you come off those platforms, you're telling the algorithm you're not there, or you're sporadic. So you have to keep doing it. It's much better to say, okay, over the next 12 months, I think the keywords around this should be then. Don't get me wrong, you don't want to go too far into the future because of all the things that can happen in this thing that you need to react to. But you can factor that in. Anyway, we're going off.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we could probably do multiple episodes and probably niche down on different sections, because just a lot of the things you just said there probably would cover many different aspects. I mean, if we round it back round to maybe startups and SMEs, and if we maybe go to that start point where a company is looking at the branding piece, what should they be looking at the very start? Should they be if it's not their bag and they're not into marketing, should they be, when they're planning out their initial budgets, should they be putting a bit aside to work on those initial things? Who are my audiences? What's my message? What are my values? What's from branding to logos to color schemes to what your audience is, your avatar? All of those sort of pieces are so important, but I guess a lot of businesses maybe look at those bits a bit later on, or that comes as a secondary thought. What would your recommendation be at that point if you're at those early embryonic stages of business?
Yeah, I think that this is all something that a marketing / PR company would tell you, I think, if you signed up with them to begin with, is that, there's a lot to consider when you're coming out the gate. and there's things like you say, there's color schemes, there's branding, there's all the kind of things that you need to make sure you've got. Now, most people, when they start a business, they'll typically get a logo, right, like yours, and that'll come with Pantones or hex codes, if you like, so that green will have a code that then needs, and then your font will need to be used, and that kind of thing. So that needs to be across everything, and it needs to be factored into what everything you're doing, whether it's graphics or video. I would say to those people, the first thing you need to think about is, as we touched on, client avatar. If that's not work you've done already, you should at least have an idea of it, even just based on trading. Whatever trading you've done or whatever market research you've done, you should understand who the person is, what their values are, and what they would look for in a partner or whatever. If you're in B2B, you want to be thinking about the type of business owner you're going to talk to, typically what they're going to care about, and ultimately what value you're going to add to them and how you're going to add it. And then, from there, okay, if you're not going to do keyword research so much, you still need to think about keywords. So
even at that stage?
Yes, because, unless, this is my approach to things, is that you are going to have to, from the outset, the only impact organically you're going to have is to remain consistent with whatever content you're putting out there, and see it as you just have to overwhelm this over time. The reason why, think of the big podcasters or the people who've blown up, quote unquote, right, in recent times. If you look back, they've been doing it for 2-3 years. Sometimes it's 10 years, but probably the minimum time has been at least 2 years, 3 years. Someone like, is it Chris Williamson or whatever? Like his early podcasts, he put out a post recently, I think, kind of like, here's me in my early days. The first few were like this, and then, but he just remained consistent, and over time that has just snowballed. And the reason why people appear to pop out of nowhere is because that snowball effect does start to work for you. If you put up a great, we were looking at, James is brilliant at, by the way, at doing presenting and putting graphics together and stuff. You have a natural skill for that, but you put together that graph about compounding interest, and you have to see this the same way, is that you're going to start off and you're going to get tiny, probably for the first 12 to 24 months. I think I would say within 9 to 12 months is typically what I see for our clients. You'll start to go.
We're talking mainly about building an audience here.
Organic, as well. I'm not talking about ad spend. I'm not talking about putting money behind, which can turbocharge things. But obviously, really you want to get an idea of what your content's doing for you organically to begin with, because if you start throwing ad spend into the mix, it's going to be harder to discern. Yes, there are metrics you can look for, and yes, there are ways of doing it. But realistically, as a small business owner, you're going to pay for all this stuff. So you're going to find it harder to be able to discern, well, how that ad campaign, did that help boost that piece of content, or was that content organic? You want to get an idea, ideally, in that first 12 months, if you're not going to go for keyword research and you're not going to do the planning, you want to have an understanding of what your content's likely to do for you organically. And now, also bear in mind that you might be able to then, if you've maybe been trading for a year or two already, you can look back at what that versus the same time last year.
You've got some data, and also you know who your customers are. So you can really then work out. So there'll be a lot of businesses, I guess, and hopefully some listening to this, that have already got a successful business. They're trading, they're doing fine, but they've actually done that without utilizing any sort of social media presence. So they've got the advantage of maybe already having some branding, then maybe their content or any of their marketing materials that they've already used, whatever they have got, they may be good, they may be bad, but they can work on what they already have, and then find what their audience want, and then deliver that in a certain way, and then find those platforms that they need to be marketing to.
Yes, I mean, typically, so like you might find most businesses when they start out, it's word of mouth. Generally, it's like, oh, we got here word of mouth.
They're
normally at the point of trying to scale. So they're at a stage where they maybe have a couple of people working for them, or they don't. But the point is they're stuck because their network's done so much of the heavy lifting. They're probably part of networking groups. They go to them all the time. Those have probably reached some sort of limit of like, okay, we get a few inquiries a week or whatever it is, but they're not seeing outside stuff coming in.
And social media is then the shop window. It's the digital shop window, isn't it, to reach that larger audience?
Yeah, and the assumption is that that's the next step, because obviously, thinking about advertising on television or whatever is costly, and actually it's probably not effective for you if that's, you much rather go onto a platform. And look, these platforms generally are free, and there are ways to maximize the utility of them for free. Again, this is down to I'm a big believer in giving away the secrets, selling the implementation. This is what a lot of this is about. I want to educate people, because hopefully even in me just expressing it, I start to understand the value of actually paying someone to do it. Because being something of an autodidact and learning this stuff as I've gone in, and also doing it from experience, I've realized, if I could shortcut the last 5 years and pay someone to do all the SEO stuff and all the things, I'd have gained those 5 years back.
The only thing I'd say with that is I've spoken to people that will look at doing LinkedIn outreach. They might do your SEO, they might do blog posts. I mean, at the moment, I do everything myself, which has its limitations as well. But the one thing I have with that is that it's my voice, and it's very authentic, and it's got the same messaging. So I see both sides of the coin with implementing external people, or employing somebody to do it. And you see lots of companies where it feels very insincere, and the message, and they're just going for search engine optimization. They are just purely going for those keywords. They're just hammering a message. And then you get the other one where everything is on brand, everything, the voice is the same, the messaging is the same. And I think it's really important that is if you are going to employ somebody to do it, you get somebody that is on the same page and understands your business intrinsically. They understand your values and what you're trying to deliver, because you could actually tarnish your reputation if you employ the wrong.
100%. And a lot of our core base has generally been people who, like yourself, are the front, the figurehead of their brand and want to be on camera. Invariably, there are a lot of people who won't want to do that. But you're absolutely right. It must be. I mean, authenticity is the greatest commodity, I think, in content marketing, but video especially, because I've seen, don't get me wrong, look, I believe in high production values for video, and in certain contexts, I think it's more important. But invariably, whenever I look back at clients' content and stuff, the bit where I've told them to just do it into their phone, and we've maybe added branding and captions, and we've done all the SEO stuff, but that performed better.
And if you've got a bigger team, I would recommend, and you're not comfortable, because not everybody is comfortable getting on camera. I'm still not that comfortable. I've had to get comfortable with it. But what my recommendation would be is, if you have a team, is find the individuals within that team that might be comfortable with it, and then you build your awareness based on the office environment, the team, everything around you. So it doesn't always have to be the director or the founder of the business is the forefront of it. And many of the larger the company gets, the less likely that actually becomes apparent.
Yeah, I would say though, find people who are naturally,
You get some comedy ones, don't you? And it's it's really cringy.
I think it's Sky. I'm not sure. One of the news outlets has started putting things on YouTube as like breaking news, whatever, and they seem to find the most, somnambulous intern that they've plucked from a desk somewhere, and it'll literally be like a plane crashed in Arizona, and they'll be like, today a plane crashed in Arizona and it fell out of the sky and 5 people are dead, and you're going, what? Like, who? That's the best person you got. You are Sky. I may be slandering Sky here. I'm not sure if it was, or the Sun. No, it was the Sun, I think. And you just think that's huge. And it's like, who wants to be on camera? I thought you were doing a coffee run. It's like, who is this person? You find someone who's got a bit of personality, who's got some enthusiasm for what they're talking. Because again, that's a huge part of it, I think, is finding someone who is passionate about what they're talking about, and not in a kind of because they want to get paid way, but in a kind of, this is what they do. And it's,
Yeah, so because I guess there's probably some psychological things here, but you're trying to build trust, with one thing, credibility, and also one of the key things we mentioned is authenticity. So I guess it's those key things. So if you're expressing that throughout the team and the environment that you're filming in, I think it's really important to try and get those things across.
And articulate as well. But I'm sorry, I know it sounds desperately snobby, but like, I don't mean it from a like the King's English point of view. I mean it from the using words properly, and because that is a good way to devalue your brand very quickly. If someone is saying, I won't think of an example, but someone using the wrong words in the wrong place, or maybe doesn't have quite the.
I suppose the only just playing devil's advocate is if you are trying to reach a particular audience. Maybe you might have a target audience. So if you are, again, it's quite hard to not pigeonhole somebody, but
thicker. What you're saying.
Well, I was going to go the other way, but if you're trying to, if you like you said, if you're trying to reach somebody that works in the king's household, then you probably need to sound very articulate and use all of those big words. But if you are trying to get somebody, let's be honest, from just to say, actually, I tell you what, if you're trying to find somebody from Scotland and you've got a southern accent, would it be more appealing using a member of staff that has a northern accent? Well, there's nothing derogatory about that, but just purely by trying to mirror or your audience. And going back to the point we made, it's really important to know who that audience is.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's a big thing in advertising too, and you probably noticed it, is that Scottish, I think is it Scottish and West Country accents are generally seen as more, or at least northern accents are more sort of
trustworthy.
Yeah. So that's why often it's David Tennant, isn't it, or someone doing it. That's right. Let's talk about this lovely investment plan that you can get about Scottish widows.
That does that. All of a sudden, you sound much more appealing. Can you keep that accent for the?
Of course, I can.
No problem at
all. It's true. Yeah, no, it is very true, and I see that it's hard to not say these things without sounding, stuck up. I don't mean it in that like you can't have working class people. What I mean is someone who's, who can convey, the point with that I'm now belaboring, fumbling my words over, but someone who can speak succinctly with passion and clearly understands it. It's easy to go grab the intern or grab the person who's, not busy right now and sling them off camera, but they're not going to be the best. You've got to think this is going to be someone who's the forefront of your brand, your company. So,
and would you say with regards to messaging then, we agree that you want to do some video content, then with the messaging there, is it direct, or, as far as your opinion? I suppose it depends whether you're selling a product or a service on what that content is, what it is you're producing. Are you talking about how good a firm you are to work at, how good your customer experience is, or do you go heavy on product, how good our product is? This is what we produce and this is what we do and this is why it's the best.
Well, you're already getting into the area of advertising versus marketing there, because again, and this is I do see this sometimes. It's with clients who maybe film their own content, or they they'll get into the reads on, and that's why we're brilliant. And it's like, try and have it in your head that you're going to inform, because who is it? There's a guy who just started a YouTube channel trying to teach kids how to, young boys, how to tie ties or shave or that kind of thing, real basic stuff, and suddenly he blew up. And I'm not saying you do that, but I think, if you're an electrician, say, for example, it's like, I've seen this before, because I'll go okay, this is blown in the house, or that's done. YouTube, and YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. It's linked to Google anyway, so you can get YouTube results and Google results. How to change a light bulb, and you probably find some electrician firm who's got a bench with a piece of wood with holes drilled in it, and and here's this is your circuit in your house. This represents the circuit. What was it? There was something. There's a guy. People installing car chargers. They did that. Some company did that, and it's like, great. Now you're the authority, and so whatever your product or service is, I think you either have that in the context and think about it of. Again, it comes back to who's your target audience. If you are B2C and you sell whatever widget it is to cut customers, then it's about thinking what the problems are that thing solves. then you've got to think, well, I've got to make content that people are going to come to when that problem occurs, and how can we then contextualize what we're doing? But it's about solving the problem for them, and not necessarily saying, I mean, look, definitely, I would always say stick something at the end of it that says, our product's great.
Yeah.
You can find out more about
I guess sort of having case studies, probably ideal for that.
social proof.
That gives you social proof and sort of explains a solution from start to finish. So we transgress a bit.
We always do.
Yes. Going back. I mean, there's so many bits, and I think on these first few episodes, we'll probably cover quite a lot, and then we can niche down on specifics and go into TikTok, YouTube, and we'll go through more details. But just to kind of cover off, have you got any feelings on the platforms in general, and what businesses might want to be, if let's say they've got no content out there at the moment, they're just producing some marketing material, is there any direction you would put them in with regards to, should they go on YouTube Shorts, should they just get an Instagram account, Facebook? Is there a particular preference for yourself?
There's sort of received wisdom. I mean, look, you can look at different demographics. What just happened to you flies in the face of this, but you might say, well, look, TikTok, Instagram, they tend to skew younger. So if you're in retirement planning, is it worth advertising on those platforms? Now, the flip side of that is that, well, because that's the presumptive, that's what everyone would say, maybe there's a big gap in the market there. And actually, maybe that's the lower competition is where you want to aim yourself. There's two approaches, I suppose. You can go, okay, but you do your market research. You say, look, Facebook tends to skew older. So if I'm targeting CEOs or I'm targeting business owners, probably that's where I want to be. Not necessarily, but you have to see these things as a Venn diagram, but maybe that's going to be where I'm best placed right now. So I'll start targeting Facebook. But there may be other demographics, maybe geographic stuff that you need to look at, or it may be, interests, or I don't know, because it's totally dependent on the business. But I would say that the other approach is to say, look, if you make video content, and this is what I try and get most clients who've got a limited budget, is make video content, whether I shoot it or we shoot it, or you do it yourself and we, organize it for you, because we can take the transcript from a video and we can put that into, if we use ChatGPT or other AI tools to generate blogs, to generate posts. Now, I'm not saying then just blurt those out on the internet. You must curate this stuff and check it and make sure it's right. And then you need to, even though ChatGPT will tell you it is, you need to go through it, make sure it's SEO.
I can't say how much of a put off it is when people do content and it's clearly been written by AI. I mean, I think it destroys you really in that regard. And I think whether you use it as a tool to help you or guide you, that's fine, but you need your voice in there.
Yes, I know, 100%. And typically what I'll do for clients is take, do the video editing, take the transcript, put it into ChatGPT and say, like, right, we need to break this down into posts, 5 posts, say, for example, on LinkedIn, I need a 1,500 word blog. I want the focus keyword to be this. It needs even distribution through the headings and the body of the thing. The structure should be X, and then go, and then it will come out, and then, okay. And usually if someone's got a WordPress site or most websites, you can't just copy and paste it. You need to take it, assign different...
I know with my blogs that I do, I have to make sure that the heading is right. But the first year I spent, I committed to doing a blog every month, and I'm typing it all out, and I didn't have any SEO input at all.
Right.
And I was putting all these words together, and I used the only thing I did use AI for was to check the grammatical side of it, made sure I'm not a skilled writer. So it would come back and do all of that. And I put them out there thinking that I would be hitting all of the right SEO markers and getting inquiries based on the information I was providing, which I felt was useful. And it was only when I actually spoke to somebody and they backworked it through a special algorithm and they said, right, what are you actually trying to achieve? Who are you trying? And they produced the same content for me and showed me how it needed to be written. And even from the point of headings, subheadings, questions. So although I had the same content, I had it all there, but because it wasn't in the right format and it wasn't uploaded to the web, because I was uploading it myself and everything, I just wasn't doing it correctly. So I actually only needed to I was putting all this effort in, but not really getting the results. I only needed to just get a little bit of expertise added to it. Yeah. And actually that transformed the way in which my website was performing. And now I'm getting much better results from it.
Yeah. And there's things like alt text and the slug and the URL.
Putting a caption on,
There's all sorts of things you need to think about with blogs and stuff like that. But again, the nuts and bolts I used to when I started out doing this, I would be writing stuff from scratch for people, and again, it had the same effect. It's just the time it took me to do it was probably, I'd say, instead of 3 hours, it now takes 1. So you think about that, that's tripled your productivity, I suppose, or cut your costs by 3. But anyway, sorry, bumped the mic. I think the point is, find the thing that you can commit to. So if it is you're going to sit down like we're doing today, and maybe do a day a week or a day a month, whatever it is, where you sit down and you plan stuff and you do it on camera, and then that's then transcribed into, and from that you can then generate a load of stuff. You use CapCut, right, to do
I do CapCut, which is a really good platform. Pay a small subscription, and that generates my my captions, and it means I can also put things into different frames. So I can put something that's from landscape and then make it into a short. So you can repurpose some of that, and I guess that's also something to think about, is if you're already producing that content and maybe it is primarily designed for your audience on LinkedIn, but actually it's not a huge leap to then redistribute that to some of the other channels. You need to make sure that you've got the right sizes, and definitely don't use, if you're putting stuff on TikTok, don't use the TikTok watermark then on other algorithms, because they will downgrade that.
Well, that's, so we'll get into this in more granular detail on other episodes. So SEO is one thing, aspect ratios is another, and there's too much there to probably chuck into this episode. But yes, you're right. My point is, do this stuff natively. So do try and have as much control over it as possible, and don't abdicate too much to AI, because like you say, things like branding, things like even coding and that kind of thing, like you want to make sure you're controlling as much of it up to the point of posting as you can. You can use things like Hootsuite and stuff. They're a bit limited, but there are, or HubSpot, I think, do it as well now, where you can just upload it to one place and it'll put it out to all the different things. But again, that then has its limitations. You're not controlling the quality of it as much. And actually, it's much better if you're saving time by using AI, even if you're using it. I would say this, but I don't think you should use it for editing. It can, but I don't think it's... it won't. You can't trust it. And if you're doing long form stuff like a podcast like this, you can't afford to just let it do it and not think about it, because someone's going to go and listen to that, and if it's full of weird, you can now do it where it will make a podcast for you and make it sound like two people having a conversation, but no. But it's so you, from one piece of content, is my point being, is you can generate content from multiple platforms, and actually, unless you know specifically that your target audience is in one place and it's like that's where you're gonna go for, fine. I would say, and from a marketing perspective rather than an advertising perspective, definitely, just put it out to as many platforms as you can. And typically shorts or reels tend to be very, very, they translate to all platforms. So.
Okay, well, I think we definitely need to home in on a few of these separate topics and niche down, because I think that's we've discussed a hell of a lot there, and we've probably gone through a very broad aspects of one element of the marketing plan. But there's definitely bits we can pick apart and go out again, I think, on some of those subjects.
For sure. Brilliant. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, again, as I say, please do like, comment, and subscribe. I know that's it. Hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and leave us a review. We really appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed it. As we're going through this thing as well, we'd really love it if you could comment and give your feedback below. Just so that we can help improve the podcast, but also if there's anything you'd like us to cover that would help you in your journey as an entrepreneur or whatever, or intrapreneur, then please, or any other portmanteau you can think of with preneur at the end of it, we'd love to help. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.